Aggie, you're a star sometimes. The bandwidth for the Wild Paw Dog podcast this week was sponsored by Dougal's Den, www.dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind. I'm John Buskill.
And I'm Karen Wilde.
And this is the podcast that gives you help and advice on how to train your dog.
In this week's show, we've got households with more than one dog. Is it a good idea? And how to make it peaceful and happy.
Well, that's a really good topic, Karen, particularly in this household.
Well, and mine too. And I think a lot of people out there, seem to have more than one dog. And in fact, surprisingly, few problems. But when the problems do occur, it can be a real issue and a real lot of effort to sort it out. I know that when you've got one dog, a problem to sort out, it takes time. When you've got more than one, then because the dogs are all interacting, it can become a real problem. Before we go on to that though, John, we had a question last week from Sandra, and I promised her I would help answer it on the podcast, and then we ran out of time. So apologies for that, Sandra. Here we are. Now, Sandra contacted me from Twitter, and her Twitter name is Wall Creeper. And the question was, how can I get my dog to jump into the car boot? He just won't, but I know he could.
Oh, so that's a really good one. That's a really good one.
And I'm sure Sandra wouldn't do this, but I did actually have a call one Sunday morning at 7 a.m. From somebody who couldn't get their dog in the car and needed some urgent help. Well, I didn't muster the helicopter and fly over, but it's obviously something that can happen from time to time, and certainly there are dogs that don't do it for whatever reason. So my first bit of advice, which I'm sure Sandra's already checked out, is to make sure that the dog is physically okay. If they aren't wanting to jump for whatever reason, then it might be that it's actually hurting them. So the first thing I would get checked out is to make sure that the dog is actually physically all right and there's nothing, causing them any pain. Second to that, I think sometimes dogs can anticipate going in the car and not really like it. Car sickness and nausea and all sorts of things to do with fear of travelling in a car can put a dog off. So that would be the second thing that I would look at. Now, it's probably outside the scope of this podcast today to talk about that, but I think it's something that we will deal with in future, because car travel is something that, again, it can be a big problem with your dog. So I would be looking at possibly signs of, if the dog's finally in the car, are you seeing any kind of eye rolling, drooling, shivering, lots of licking, and that kind of worry factor. It doesn't mean that the dog doesn't enjoy getting to the destination, and that's often not enough of a reward to make them actually want to get in the car. So it might be that the dog's not really looking forward to the car journey because they've been feeling a little bit sick. They don't actually have to be sick for them to feel a bit nauseous, and I think that applies to humans as well. And I know from my own experience, I get motion sick. I'm not actually sick, but I can feel pretty ill sometimes. So it might be something like that. If it's the other aspect is that, don't forget, a dog is jumping into what looks like an enclosed space. So it may be that they can't judge the distance very well, or that they're finding it a little bit threatening. So they're going into a smaller space that may be a little bit dark. They might have been uncomfortable or rolled around in the past. They might have knocked themselves in the past. We don't know. We can't get inside their head. But I would look at it and think, well, is it a narrow space? Are they feeling a little bit trapped and they don't want to go in that way? So if that's the case, bear that in mind, try and get them used to it gradually. And all in all, the main issue is to get the dog to enjoy being in the car and want to get in there. So if they're physically capable of doing it and it's not causing them any harm to do it, then you need to start to make the car a nice place for them to want to be in. So if they don't want to eat in the car, then that's an obvious sign that they're stressed and not enjoying it. So that would be the first thing. But I did have a client once where they absolutely swore blind the dog will not get in the car. But actually what was happening was they were putting a bit of biscuit in the car, where the dog travels, and the dog didn't, biscuit is biscuit, it's a bit boring. So the owner had a great idea. They said, I've got some special sausage that I've got for myself. I think it was a special chicken sausage or something with really nice sort of herbs. And they very generously cut off some of this sausage and they put it in the car, and the dog jumped straight in. So their faces were just amazement. But it was because I said, the dog's got to feel like it's worth it. And as soon as they put the sausage in, the dog just clambered straight in. So there's ways of making it easier for the dog as well. If it's the jump that's the problem and the dog's not used to doing that, You can get ramps that you can put up against the car, or you can give them a little step, or you can find other ways to help them in. So there's loads of options for you there, Sandra.
Yeah, can I suggest one of the things that I do is, well, I don't know if you have it, Sandra, but if you have a crate or if you have a space that you like to put the dog in when they feel secure for their bed or whatever, I take the oh God, I'm thinking in Swedish here. The rug that the dog lies on. I use the same rug that the dog lies on in their safe place. I just go and put it in the car, so that the same smell is there, that same sense of security, and I find that really works. Although I can't get mine to jump in. I mean, I'm still. They're bassets.
Mind you, you've got bassets, so yeah. I mean, there's obviously a risk, and also jumping out of the car. Everybody, do be really careful, especially if you've got a young dog. I've been advised by various vets that it's not a great idea to let them just boing out of the car if they're quite young, or if they're heavy set, or if they've got short legs. We can talk about physiology and breeding and that sort of thing, and various physical characteristics not being particularly safe.
Oh yeah.
But you have to bear in mind your dog's body shape as well. So. It could be that, and I think you've raised an important point there, John, which is make it familiar. And the other tip that I would have for owners, if their dog is worried, and not talking about the car sickness thing again, because we could talk for the whole podcast about it, but is to get the dog accustomed to being in there with things that they really enjoy doing. So you could put their dinner in there and let them eat in the car, and just keep the car on the drive. Go and just make it a regular part of their day, so they spend time in there, and so that they feel okay about it. So it becomes a familiar thing, not associated with anything else, and anything bad. So they get so used to going in there that they're just as used to going in there as they are and going in their own bed at home. That would be my tip. So.
Yeah, and if anyone else has got any tips, why not share them with us? You can send us a sound file. It's very easy to record that on your iPhone or your Android phone. There's lots of voice recording apps out there. You can send that to podcast@intellidogs.com, or you can just send us a regular email to that address, or why not send Karen a tweet on Twitter, and that's twitter.com/wildpaw. Well, let's get on to the main topic of the show today, Karen, multi-dog households.
Yeah, I mean, this week's topic was actually inspired by a question I got from a podcast listener, Rosie P., who said, we have a 14-week-old red Labrador called Madison, but our 6-year-old Yorkie Harvey is really jealous and goes for her, especially if we tell the Labrador off. Help. I mean, hopefully we'll answer the question during the podcast, because, Rosie, you're not the only one with this kind of problem. And I did a quick scan of Twitter to just see generally a bit of a straw poll, who's got more than one dog. And we have got a huge list. So I'm going to name them because, it's really nice to know that these households are going so well. So we've got Laura Jane, who's got Toby and Kaiser. They're Patterdale and a Chihuahua Yorkie cross.
And Georgina with Garbo and Elle. That's a Weimaraner and a Vizsla.
Yeah, we've got Jane with Bailey, who's a Retriever cross poodle. Yogi, who's a Springer cross miniature poodle. And Daisy, who's a Labradoodle.
James with 3 Hoverworts. And he says that the dogs are better behaved than the kids.
Yeah, which made me laugh. Katie, who's got a Chihuahua cross Pomeranian called Pig and a Border Collie called Fly.
Oh, Gareth, I like the names of your 2 lurchers. Merlot, who is 9, and Bill, who's 7, and they're both rescues.
We've got, now it's not their actual name, Newport Pagnell is their Twitter name, Arnie, who's a German Shepherd Boxer, St Bernard English Bull Terrier Cross, and Dee Dee, who's a German Shepherd Mastiff English Bull Terrier Cross. Wow.
Anne's got Brody and Jess, who are long-haired German Shepherd dogs.
Georgie, who's got Dachshund called Molly, a Dachshund called Chico, and a Springer called Jupiter, which is a great name for a Springer.
Hi, Louisa. You've got Molly and Mickey, who are both rescue collies. And Mickey's had 6 homes by the age of 8 months. So well done, Louisa, for doing a really, really great job there. And Molly had an awful start before coming to you, I understand. And now she's a level 3 SAR dog.
Yeah, search and rescue. That's really good, isn't it? It just shows you sometimes they get put in the wrong homes. We've got Pauline. Now, Pauline says she's got too many to list on one tweet because obviously Twitter limits you to 140 characters. So she's basically got a huge mix of breeds. Oh my gosh, I can't even start the list, but I want to see photos, Pauline, if you can send some in. And some barks from you, Pauline. I want some barks because you've got lots of dogs.
But what are, so I can see German Shepherd dogs there. What's an SWD, Karen?
I haven't worked these out actually. I've just quickly cut and pasted them from this morning. There's Jack Russell. I can't read the others from here. Working Cocker. We'll come back. I want photos,
All
to be
right.
honest.
And then there's Judith, who's the lucky and proud owner, she says, of 3 male energetic dogs. She's got a 14-month-old Mertz. Mertz is the name, I guess. A 2-year-old Nadar, I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. And 4-year-old Rothko. What a great name.
Rothko.
And she likes to foster as well occasionally.
Oh, that's good. I was just thinking SWD must be something like Spanish water dog or something like that. I'm sure he must be. Anyway, where were we? Okay, and then we've got Nats, who's been on the podcast before. Now, she has Mika, and she says she thought she had more dogs than Mika, who's a German Shepherd, but that turned out to be the fluff the dog's leaving around the house.
Okay, Karen, and how many dogs have you got in your house today?
We've got 5. 5 today, which is quite good fun. And 2 are my own, and the other 3 are not, but they're staying, and they're all related. One belongs to a friend, one belongs to a client, and the other one belongs to another client. So, as you know, I do take dogs in for boarding and training.
And I've got...
so they're not trained while they're here. They do get trained eventually by me, but not yet.
Well, I've got 5 here too. I've got Winnie, who's the oldest, and she's the mother of Tia. And Tia is the mother of Dearborn, also known as Stan, and Digby. And then I've got Aggie, who regularly appears on the show, and Aggie's in the room with me today.
Aggie is a character. And I've got Bonnie on my lap here. She's being very good and very quiet. So, obviously, a lot of these households have a lot of dogs, and the dogs are, reasonably compatible. I'm sure there's the odd skirmish here and there, and I'm sure that everyone would tell me, well, yeah, we do have the occasional problem. But what happens if you've got a problem, like Rosie's mentioned? What do you do about it? And I often get asked as well, should I get another dog? Because they might have a dog that has a problem, and they think, well, should I get another dog to keep it company? So let's work through it a little bit more systematically. I do honestly think that there is no reason why dogs shouldn't get along. I quite often get asked when dogs come to stay, or someone rings me and they say, what do the dogs get on? And I think, yes, temperamentally, they're fine. They mix with other dogs regularly. They're not territorial. They're not, they've not been trained to be like that, and I didn't pick them to be like that. So, generally there isn't a problem. If there is, I anticipate it. So there's no reason in my head why they shouldn't get along. Where you have problems are where dogs have been isolated from other dogs, so they don't know what to do. They need a bit of reparenting from another dog, probably. Or if there's certain turmoil in the household that the dogs aren't interpreting right. And the interesting thing that Rosie said was about, one dog getting quite sort of funny when the other dog's getting told off. And to me, that's partly because in a multiple dog household, dogs don't always know when you're talking to them. They just hear a raised voice or a bit of anxiety, and they don't know whether it's meaning them or not. Even if they know their name, unless you've taken great pains to teach them all their names individually, which I know a lot of trainers that have, even then they still get wound up by the amount of tension in the atmosphere. So, and I'm often asked to sort out doggy problems from multi-dog households.
I mean, I think we've touched on this a little bit in the past. We've talked about individually training your dog. For example, like I was having problems getting Dearborn and Digby to walk together, so I went back to walking them individually. And when one of them's got it, then you work with the other one, then bring them together. I see what you mean, because you can't just train one dog when you've got 3 or 4 there.
No, it's very hard, because what happens is you might think that getting another dog is just going to be a bit more food, a bit more of the food bill, a bit more time maybe, but actually the dogs interact with each other as well, and that's a whole new factor. So if you were to draw a sort of mathematical diagram of interactions between you and the dog and other members of the family, and then add in another dog, you have to multiply all those interactions and the ones between the dogs themselves. And the really interesting thing about it is, of course, the dogs' interactions are often going to be missed by us. We're not always going to know what's going on in their head at any given moment, and what they deem to be important and what the other dog deems to be important. So the worst times I've seen dogs that are, they're really not getting on is when they're very similar. I don't mean physically, I mean in temperament. If they both desperately love toys, or they're really into food, or they absolutely love people, they tend to compete all the time. So where Rosie said about jealousy, I'm not sure if it's jealousy, but I do think, because I don't know if dogs think in that way, but I definitely think if they value something that's really important to them and this other dog appears and starts trying to kind of muscle in, they're not going to like it.
No,
So
exactly. I think that, that's exactly the situation I see with having multiple dogs. Bassett's are very food orientated. Aggie will go ballistic if anyone goes near her food. It's the only motivation she has in life. She hates walking. She hates snow. She hates rain. She likes her bed, her mattress or her mat, and her food. And any of those things, I can see the other dogs have to negotiate their way around her. And the same with the young dogs. They are both very, very food motivated, and they wolf it down. So I think it starts off actually with management, that you don't get into the situation where you're going to have a fight, because you know that the two dogs, will compete for their food.
Absolutely. And I think that's why one of the dangers of having two dogs from the same litter, which I honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. I know a lot of people want to do that because it's two puppies at the same time. But yeah, it's an awful lot of work. You're not only training two dogs together, you're training two young dogs together, which I know you will sympathise with, John, because, obviously having the own litter. It's a big, big, big deal. It's not a little deal. So if you've got two dogs that are related, then there's every chance that they have similar instincts, which means that you might have two dogs that are very similarly competitive, and probably in nature they would leave the nest and go off and do their own thing. Actually, they're in a household where they can't do that. So you have to manage it, but you have to do a lot of work to be very much in control of what's going on. And I don't want to get into one dog's dominant over the other, because I think that gives the wrong impression. What you tend to find is that dogs form individual relationships with different dogs and different people. So one dog will back down to another dog over food, but they might not back down over a toy or a person or something else. So for Rosie, for example, I would be saying, look at what's important to that, to both dogs. What's important, because puppies can be a lot more amenable when they're little. They don't appear to be, but they're still learning. So if it's the case that, the older dog is actually feeling a bit usurped and actually really loves certain things going on in the house and is particularly familiar with the routine, it might be your attention that the older dog values. It might be that it's their bed. It might be something like that. You need to identify the cause of that conflict, and then you can start to work it out. Let's go back to basics then, John. I mean, if somebody said to me, should I get another dog? Is this something that they should do? And my first advice to them would be, well, the first question I would ask is why? Why do you want another dog? Not why in a kind of, oh my gosh, don't do it, but why? What is your reason? Is it that you've always had lots of dogs and you just want another dog?
Yeah.
Which, okay. Is it that you feel your dog is lonely and needs company? Is it that, let's take it to the extent where, is it that your dog has separation problems and you think getting another dog is going to help, or that your dog is very active and you think getting another dog is going to help? So at that end of the spectrum, I would say, okay, that's probably going to be the wrong decision, because separation anxiety problems generally focus around the person leaving to go out.
Yeah.
So they can be very focused on human beings. So you get another dog in the picture, and it may or may not help, because it might be that the dog with the separation problem is so focused on the people, they don't actually care whether another dog is there or not. All they care about is the person there. So my advice would be, sort that problem out before you get another dog. Don't think that replacing one with another is going to help, because you might end up with two very anxious dogs that both really miss you when you're out. And I have seen.
I think one of the other things here is, you also have to think breed specific. Some breeds are very much, solitary dogs from what I've seen. And some breeds, for example, Bassets, they're incredible pack dogs. They do not do well often on their own. They from what I've seen through my involvement, Bassets always seem to really enjoy, lying around together. What's your experience of that, Karen?
I think that's quite an issue. And I think that, some dogs are bred to work together. bred to work with people or bred to work with other dogs. So you need to be aware of that. If you've got a crossbreed, I mean, looking at the list of people that have contacted, just said,
lots of
I've got more
wonderful
than one dog,
crosses there.
loads and loads of crossbreeds. So if you're picking something specific and you want to go for a pedigree, then be aware that that's what you might end up with. If you haven't got that issue, if you take on a rescue, again, in my experience, rescues, when they first come home to you, they can really hyper attach and get very clingy.
Yeah.
So you've got to be a little bit aware of that as well. But I don't think that just getting another dog is going to solve problems. The other thing I was saying about, if you've got a very active dog, be careful that getting another dog to sort of solve that problem, it might work, but it might not, and you might end up with
escalate.
Yeah, might 2 really manic dogs, 3 really manic dogs. So my advice to you there would be, get a doggy playmate for your dog that doesn't belong to you. Find a neighbor or, a friend or someone in your community that has, another dog that your dog can play with regularly, which, to be fair, they should be doing anyway. Then at the end of the day, if your dog's tired out and not actually passing on any problems and doesn't appear to be anxious, then you might want to think, actually, that worked out really well. If I could get a compatible dog that's similar to our friend's dog, that might be a better solution. But don't just buy one and think, okay, this is going to happen, because it isn't. And then you end up having to train both dogs at once.
You've already mentioned ages. And I just to reiterate what you said, I mean, I'm in a special position here because I'm a dog breeder. And so I've got 2 9-10-month-old dogs here. And that was not my plan. And Stan, Dearborn, is going to the UK when his rabies vaccinations have taken. But this is the first time in my life that I've ever had 2 dogs exactly the same age from the same litter staying this long. And that is and I'm a very experienced dog owner. That's an incredible amount of work. And I think if you're new to the show, this is your first episode that you're listening to, take heed from my experience. And I think that leads on to this whole age issue. One of the things that people come to me as a breeder and say, my Basset, she's getting on, and I want to introduce another dog to the home, a young dog, a pup. Is that okay? What are your thoughts on this kind of thing, Karen?
Yeah, and I love that thought, because I've got caught out, actually. I had a dog that was very old and one that was sort of middle-aged, and I was planning to get a puppy, and then the middle-aged one died. So I ended up with a very old dog and a puppy, and it was like this huge age gap. I like there to be a reasonable age gap between the dogs, because I think, personally, I can get the young dog brought on to an age where I can control it, and I know pretty much its personality, and it's fairly set. Maybe it's 2 or 3 years old, maybe. Depends on the dog. And then I might consider getting another one and wait till that one's developed up to a certain age, and then might consider getting another one. I wouldn't want to have 2 adolescent dogs together in my house because of all of the various sparks and things that go off between them.
Can I talk management again here, Karen? Because, I mean, I can say, like, for example, Winnie's, she's just coming up to 8. And I've got these, her grandpups who are 9-10 months old. And of course, the young dogs are really, really energetic. 2 of the most energetic Bassets I've ever had. And Winnie's at that stage in her life where she wants to soft the soft fun. She wants to, relax and potter around and sleep away for hours. And sometimes it really stresses her when the young dogs are around. So I'm very, very careful to read the signals that she's giving when she wants to be alone, when she wants to be in a room on her own, or maybe with Aggie. She and Aggie are about the same age, just about 9-10 months difference, a year difference between them. I make sure that they do that, and I'm lucky enough to have the space, the area to allow for management between different ages.
Yeah, that's so important, John. Absolutely. I mean, I'd say hello to a couple of clients who I'm sure are listening. I won't name you, but you know who you are. Hello. Had exactly that problem. Basically, the older dog, the bitch ended up going into season, and the puppy was pestering, as puppies normally do. Yep. But the bitch is older. She's not old. She's not exactly the same as, an old dog that's getting pestered, but it applies. She'd come into season. She just didn't want to know. The puppy was being just a normal puppy. And it got to the point where, she wasn't feeling secure in the puppy's presence, because the puppy didn't really understand. And it's a heck of a burden to put on an older dog to have this puppy constantly on it all the time. That's a lot of work. So they are going to get tired and they are going to get grumpy. So my advice for anyone who's taking on a puppy is make sure you've got other playmates for the puppy. Puppy's its own age partly, but also nice, friendly adult dogs, different descriptions, different, different looks, everything that will just help the older dog out, so that it's not always left to the older dog to teach all the lessons that it needs. Because you might end up with a real conflict in your house because the older dog just says, I've had enough.
Yeah. I mean, this, of course, is management. And I think if this is the first time that you've got a couple of dogs in your house, maybe you're listening to the show because you've been looking for information and help about having multiple dog households. One of the things that you can do is, and I've said this before, is to keep your dog diary, is to note when there are key conflict situations, because our memories are deceiving. And if you've got it written down, just a couple of notes in an Excel file, or a piece of paper, or whatever, some actual journal that you've got specifically, you can go back and check through that. That's really, really important. And that's something that I did when I was starting out with multiple dog households. I think the other thing that you have to remember is, and particularly if you go get a puppy to go with your older dog, is don't forget the older dog. A dog that's had, special time with you, that special cuddle during the day at the end of the day. Don't suddenly just give all that to the younger dog, or the dog that you brought in as a rescue, for example. Make sure, even if you have to write down on your mirror on a post-it in the bathroom, so you go in and it says, okay, 10 to 11, it's Timmy time, and 3 to 4, it's Megan time, that they specifically have that special moment with you.
Yeah, give them a break, and be aware that, bringing a puppy in is tiring for you, so it's going to be tiring for the other dogs. So give them somewhere where they can just get away and just sit quietly, or just be undisturbed for a bit. I know that it's more work, but then if you're taking on another dog, then that's a responsibility that you've taken on. So it's something that you're going to have to deal with. You don't have to necessarily make a big deal out of it, but you do need to be aware that they're not always going to want to get on. One dog might be feeling a bit rubbish one day. They might have a bellyache. They might have a bit of a headache. I do strongly believe that, that they do feel things like we do. And there's sometimes where they just don't really want to know. And, you're right about keeping a diary, because I think emotions mean that you have a selective memory. The bad things stick out in your head quite more significantly than the good things. So if you note it down, if you've got a multi-people household, which you generally have as well, lots of kids going on, just stick it on the fridge and make sure that everyone just notes down, they were fine. And you might find it's not as bad as you think, or you might find that it's escalating, in which case it's time to call somebody in, a professional, to help. So to sort of go over things that you might want to consider. First of all, why are you getting another dog? So, separation anxiety may not be cured. Dogs are social creatures. They might get on, but then again, they might not. And certainly 2 bitches together, you need to be a little bit careful of, because there's a whole raft of things to do with seasons and bitches defending litters. Even if they haven't got a litter, they might have phantom pregnancy. There's lots to think about there. So look it up and do your research. It's a lot of extra work. It's not just a bit more to the food bill. You've got, kenneling when you go on holiday, or looking after the dogs while you're away, or taking them with you. So that's something. Vet treatments, you've got your vaccinations and unexpected things, and insurance. Now, a lot of clients who have more than one dog will ring me and say, I need some help. Because I'm an accredited behaviourist, the insurance companies will often cover my fees, but they've found that the premiums have gone up so much because they've got so many dogs that they haven't got the insurance. So just be aware, that's something to bear in mind if you do have a problem. Obviously you're paying to have them microchipped, and you're going to need to train them, and you're going to need to train them separately, which might mean the big bore for you of having to walk your dogs separately for a while. That a lot of people look at me and say, do I really have to do that? Because they've got this much time allotted to the dog walk. And unfortunately, if you've got a problem, yes, you are going to have to walk them separately. So I love seeing my dogs playing together. I love seeing them interacting. They absolutely adore one another, and they get on really well. And they're a real pair, And I think they would really miss each other. So I like to have more than one dog, but I just think we've got to be so aware of what's going on in between them and in their heads.
As time is beginning to move on, Karen, and we're getting towards the end of the show, I think there is one really important issue that we need to take up, and that's what about when you lose a dog? If you've got 2 dogs, or if you've got a multiple dog home, what happens when you lose a dog?
Yeah, I got asked about that. Is that Aggie in the background?
Yes. Axie girl.
He's like, yeah. Rah, 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 rah.
Disc on feet.
I can hear her muttering under there.
Yeah. Having a
I
scratch.
think I did get somebody contact me on Twitter about that this week, and they said it was a neighbour's dog, and they've lost one dog, and the dog's barking and howling all day because it's missing the other dog. And my little dog Pepper, when my other dog died, he walked out into the lawn. He sat in the middle of the lawn. He put his head up to the sky, and he howled and howled and howled, and it was the most heartrending noise. And obviously, I thought, oh, he really misses the dog. It probably wasn't. I was upset as well.
Yeah.
Aggie's really trashing. What is she doing?
She's just lying on her back having a scratch. Aggie's allergic to the pollen, and so it really gets to her.
Poor Aggie. So I think you have to treat it like a big change in the dog's life if that happens. It's a big change. It could be a bit of separation. It does fade, but for that period of time, I try and get my owners to get the dog out, get them doing other things, not necessarily get them interacting with another dog. They might not want to do that, but get them to just have lots and lots of things to do that slightly change their routine so they don't think, well, where's the other dog? This is the normal part of the day where my dog friend would be here. Get them doing other stuff and get them enjoying other stuff so that you quickly get them into a routine that they're still finding rewarding, but it's a different part of their life. You know, they've moved on.
I mean, it's a very tough. It can be a very tough situation, particularly if you're incredibly upset about the loss of your dog, and
because the dog will pick it up from you as well. But you know, going back to what we were saying to Rosie, I think I would first of all, I would try and identify what is important to both dogs, and is it something they're squabbling about? Any added tension in a house where there might be underlying tension that probably is not being picked up on. Maybe the puppy's a bit lively at this age, and the other dog's just thinking, I've had enough. Try and pick up on those times and make sure your older dog's got a bit of space and a bit of time. If you're training or doing any work with them, give your older dog some time to you. Trying to train two dogs together is seriously, you can do it once they're both pretty reliable. But trying to train a puppy and an older dog where the puppy's very distracted, it can be, I think Alan Sugar said on telly, on The Apprentice the other day, like trying to nail jelly to the wall. Or my mum's favourite, which is trying to put an octopus into a string bag. Or the old one trying to catch a greased pig. In other words, it's not easy.
No, exactly.
But you can do it. It can be done. I would train up one dog first, then work on the other dog, then start putting them together and go back to the beginning a bit, get them both working, get them understanding their name. Each dog needs to know their own name so that when you direct it, so like Rosie's saying, if one dog's stressed and the other one's getting told off, I probably wouldn't tell them off like that because they're both picking up on it. I would distract one, use their name a lot, get them to really be familiar with their own name so that they've got a better idea for directing it at them.
I think before we wrap up, and I think this is obviously something that we'll return to in another show because it is a big issue just from the whole list of people that have got many dogs there. I think the other thing is to just mention, and that's the impact on your family. If you are the dog person, if your partner goes along with you having a dog, or you're not fully, the family has got to be committed to it. It's got to be really important. Now, I'm known as the Angelina Jolie of the Basset world here. I admit that I'm a mad Basset person, and my family put up with me, I think, and I know it is a source of tension and stress here sometimes. A lot of the time, they're very, very understanding, but when it comes around to holidays, you're so right, Karen. All the planning, kenneling, or bringing someone in to look after the woofs, which I'd like to do. It's a big thing. And you do need to discuss what you're going to do with having lots of dogs.
Yeah, I mean, there's pitfalls, aren't there? I mean, there's pitfalls with every part of dog ownership has its downside. And, like I say, it's not all doom and gloom. And it's really, really nice. When on the good days, it's fantastic. But just be prepared. And if you've got lots of kids as well, be aware that you've got the kids interacting with the dog, and you end up, if you draw this little diagram I was saying to you about, the more people that are involved with the dog's lives, it's great. But the more you're going to have your dog radar firmly switched on, eagle eyes everywhere, just to make sure that, one kid's not letting the one dog out and the other dog out. To me, that's all part of life. it wasn't an unexpected part. And I think it's the things that are unexpected that do the most harm. So be prepared. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. But just think, right, well, this might happen. When it does, okay, I kind of anticipated. And I can live with it. It's not such a disaster.
Yeah, I think we're speaking to two audiences here. We're speaking to people who might be thinking about having another dog or have got another dog and there are issues that are cropping up. But then there is also those of us that have multi-dog households and love it, who think, you know, people say to me, how many dogs? You're crazy. And I'm like, but I love it.
Yeah, I get that. I don't even see it as I'm kind of so. I think management is important, and I'm so used to the routine of it. I'm so used to what to do. We've got a stair gate here. We've got another stair gate there. We've got, you know, this dog can do this. This dog tends to stay over here. This dog likes to stay in bed late, you know, and it's just kind of like that. And I don't pander to them. They're all part of the family and they do things as we do. But you get used to it, and I just wouldn't want it to be a shock to anyone.
All right then, Karen. I understand you've got a quick thank you.
Oh, I have, yes. Well, lots of thank yous to people, but a really big thank you to Gabriella at collarways.com, who sent me some. Well, she sent it to Bonnie, actually, not to me. Some lovely Comfy Dog Spa products, because I put a blog up about Bonnie going quite flaky. Oh, well,
yes, Aggie's right by my feet saying, I want to go out.
Let me out.
Come on, tell us about Bonnie.
I'll just be quick. Well, Bonnie went through a very flaky stage not that long ago, publicly, and I wrote a blog about it, and I had loads of response. I mean, Dora West Herbs sent me some ideas for people for evening primrose oil. Oh gosh, so many to mention. But Yamiga sent some ideas. They didn't send me product. I mean, they sent ideas. Gabriella took pity on poor Bonnie, sent her a little spa package of goodies. So thank you, Gabriella. Collarways.com have sent it. I'm so grateful. I'm going to report on it because Bonnie just looked at it and sort of, there's one little scented spray that she really loves. So we will let you know what happens with my flaky dog if you're interested.
Yeah.
And tomorrow I'm off to Kensington Palace for their Dashing Dog Show, which is run by Dogs Today magazine, amongst other people. And I'm really looking forward to that. It sounds like it's going to be a great day. So if you're in London, you're going near Kensington Palace. I don't know if this podcast will reach you actually by then, but hopefully I saw you there. If I didn't see you there, hopefully I'll see you soon. But it's a lovely, lovely event. So please go along if this comes out before then. And if it doesn't, my apologies. But I will be blogging on it today. So you will know about it before I go.
All right. Well, next week's podcast is going to be on active dogs. But for today, I think that's about it. And remember, you can get every episode of the Wild Paw Dog podcast if you subscribe. And you can subscribe at iTunes. The best way actually to find us is to go to intellidogs.com and go to the episode in the blog post, and there's a link at the bottom of the post that says subscribe. So subscribe and get every episode updated on your copy of iTunes, or you can go to the BlackBerry network. We're now on the BlackBerry network, and if you download the app, if you're a BlackBerry person, you can get your phone to have every episode pushed to your phone, I understand, which is awesome.
Wow.
And remember, if you've got any comments or questions or things that you'd like to things you'd like us to talk about on the show, just get in touch. And you can tweet Karen at wildpaw on Twitter, or you can send us an email to podcast@intellidogs.com.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to go back over some of the podcasts that are already there. We had a lot of questions this week about barking, and we did a podcast and a blog on barking. Now, it might be that we haven't put the links up clearly, but they are there. So there's quite a few different topics that you might want to just pop onto the iPod or other generic MP3 player, and just, take it with you on a dog walk, on a car journey. And Aggie's so funny. I think we better call it a day.
All right then, Karen. Until next time, everybody. Thanks very much for listening. The bandwidth for the Wild Paw Dog podcast this week was sponsored by Dougal's Den, www.dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind.